So very good afternoon, everybody. Other than the fact that this was forced as a plenary session, because of which everybody needs to be here, so I was just trying to see as to how many people were really curious in a post-lunch session about Agri and IoT. Because if it was not a plenary, I don't know how many people would actually turned up for a parallel track on Agri. But to my surprise, I saw that of about 500 people that I see here, as many as 200, which is a good 40% that actually can elect you as a president if you were to be contesting something, 40% were curious. Because there is something which is happening between yesterday and today and tomorrow in the context of agriculture, because of which technology can play a role. And there is something also changing in the context of technology, because of which it can make a difference to agriculture. And obviously, only business models can take it forward. Enough of not-for-profit and government and so on, which have dabbled in this place. And at the end of 70 years after independence and our own self-rule, if a per capita income of a farmer is just about 1/5 of the rest of the professions in India, I think we haven't done much. And even now we are talking about just about doubling. And there also we are skeptical whether doubling is possible at all or not. I think that is the kind of a context. So let me paint as to why it is possible and why technology can make a difference, and that's where the opportunities are there for everybody. And why possibly the rest of the 300 also can look at this with some amount of curiosity as to what is possible. Obviously if you have to raise incomes of a producer, it has to come from the consumer. It can't come from somewhere else. In the past, it has been taken from taxpayer, it has been taken from taxpayers of some other countries and so on. And even today, agriculture largely lives around the world on some taxpayers' money. And there is some shift that is occurring in the consumer space. See, until now, if you produced more, you pushed it to the market and got some money for that. So which is what you can see as a production-driven supply chain. We were a shortages economy, therefore it made sense. But I think that has shifted with now consumer being able to pay for, at least a part of the consumer, about a 25-30% of the consumers, being able to pay for the new needs that exist. Variety, not just rice and wheat and some core cereals, but also look for milk, meat and fruits and vegetables and so on. Consumer looking for quality. Consumer is looking for convenience in terms of buying, in terms of consumption. Consumer is looking for safety and traceability of food and so on. So there are various new demands that the consumer is placing on the market. And that's where lies the opportunity to deliver these needs to the consumer and raise farmer income and not from somewhere else. Now, in order for a farmer to actually reach out to these demands, you obviously need to fundamentally change this production-driven supply chain into a demand-driven value chain. And what does it mean? Obviously, a farmer needs to access information, something which is real-time, something which is relevant in terms of hyperlocal and so on, but something which is also global because markets are integrated. Farmer also needs knowledge to translate this information into action, knowledge which is personalized. After that, farmer also requires inputs, both physical in terms of seed, nutrients, and so on, as well as a lot of intangible inputs in terms of risk management solutions like insurance and credit and so on, as well as access to markets in terms of post-harvest value addition and subsequent market access in the best possible manner. So you have millions of consumers and millions of producers, each one very heterogeneous. And therefore, connecting them was not easy in the past. Now, that's a changing context of the consumption and Indian agriculture, which gives us hope and an opportunity to look forward to this doubling income in the first instance and probably raising it even more as we go forward. Now, what is changing in technology? So IoT, obviously, most people present in this hall know what IoT is. But in my own layperson's language, if you were to look at, so it is actually bringing together 4 different technologies. One is a telescope. That is, you are able to see something which is far away. Another is a microscope, which you are able to really get into too much of a detail right inside. And third is some kind of a processor that all the data is getting processed. And fourth is a remote control, that you are able to act from a distance. Now, that's a disruptive change that is now brought into the digital world. You are able to piece all of this together, that what I can only do through a telescope that I can't do in a microscope and so on. If you have millions of consumers on one side, millions of producers on the other side, and you need to match them through these different needs and from both sides, this kind of disruption actually provides that opportunity in terms of a telescope, a microscope, a processor, and a remote control. And in ITC Infotech, we call this with a new phrase called digitaligence. So it's a manner of extracting intelligence from digital footprint so that you are able to interact and create. Yes, there is some discussion on traditional knowledge and modern knowledge. I think the best knowledge going forward is some kind of a fusion of these two, interactive knowledge co-creation platforms. Now, if this is what technology can do, many startups that I interact with in this space, in agri and tech and so on, quite often you have a wonderful solution, which is a point solution, that I can get you weather forecast, which may be hyperlocal, or I can measure through a sensor what each leaf wants in terms of nutrition and moisture and so on. But how do you translate this into an outcome for the farmer? Because if you just deliver that as an input to the farmer, I talked about you need information, knowledge, input and output. All 4 need to be stitched together because the farmer is small and market is not yet developed for him to access everything in one go. And therefore, you require that solution to be delivered as an outcome-oriented service. Yeah, you can also look at a business model where I create this intellectual property and sell this intellectual property. You can also look at a business model, you can convert this into something in a box and sell it. But if you have to really look at a service as an opportunity, and ultimately that is what has to reach out to the farmer to raise the incomes, you also need to do an outcome-oriented service. And based on our own experiences, we saw 3 different kinds of services are viable. One is you need to provide some anchor in order to complete that service as an outcome. So one is an information as an anchor, but a complete solution. You can deliver that solution yourself or stitch it together with a few other partners and deliver that. So whether it's weather forecast or market prices and any of that information, together with whatever that needs to happen in the rest of the 3 elements in the information knowledge continuum that I talked about, and offer that. The second is a testing-based service. You can test your soil, your nutrition, your moisture, and whatever else that is required for you to be able to make that precise, whether it's a crop farm or whether it's an animal farm or whatever. So testing-based, but then lead on to how does it translate into action. And the third is actually convert this into an input, and an input as an anchor, input-based outcome-oriented solution in terms of whether you provide an organic input or an inorganic fertilizer and some kind of a crop protection chemical or whatever. So you deliver that, but together you need to provide that information and knowledge and so on. So some anchor service together with an outcome-oriented is one approach that we saw working. So those technology-based service providers who succeeded and scaled have been able to convert this into an outcome. Where already market has evolved, maybe it will 2 years from now or 3 years from now, you can look at one point solution and somebody else will take care of the other part. The second kind of a business model is what we do, for example, in the ITC eChowpal, and now we are in prototyping what we call ITC eChowpal 4.0, which is a lot more digital lens embedded kind of a model, where you create a whole ecosystem and offer the ecosystem as a service for different players to plug and play. That you need all of this together, but someone orchestrates this whole ecosystem And then independent players can plug and play. And that's one major interface that we really have with the technology vendors or service providers or whatever, so that you go-to-market engagement is there with this platform. That somebody is plugging and playing and somebody is really ensuring that I'm only doing one bit of what I can do. But if outcome has to happen, can the ecosystem guarantee that? So that I can stitch together 4 other people that come and actually ensure that outcome actually happens to the farmer, which in turn is linked to the consumer. Ultimately, if you're just producing more or improving quality by itself, is of no value. That's why I started with the consumer. The money has to come from the consumer. And therefore, those market linkages in terms of whether whatever subsequent steps of processing or sorting or whatever. So I think those kinds of business models need to be thought through in order to take these things forward. So let me close there by saying that I think a very interesting change in the context of food and agriculture, or for that matter, any other kind of consumption of agriculture produce, and interesting disruption in technology. When you fuse these together, I think they are made for each other. And so therefore, I think enough and more opportunities for all of us here. Thank you.